This is the video lesson to start off talking about the topic of ratios. It's lesson 1.2, and you're going to need your notebook and that blue piece of paper that I handed out for notes today. So your table of contents is going to be page 23. The foldable is actually talking about 3 different topics in one foldable. We're just going to do one column today and then do some examples. And on that page, I want you to title it in your table of contents ratios, rates, proportions foldable. And you can see those words right on your notes. So fill that in. So what I'd like you to do with this foldable is I'd like you to take your sheet of paper, I'd like you to fold it into thirds. And then you can write the title again on the front. When you glue this in onto page 23, I want you to glue it over to the left so that you have a column over to the right so that we can do examples and write some work on that actual note page. So make sure when you glue this in, you slide it over so you have room on the other side. And here we go. I broke up the note sheet into 3 different sections. The first section is right up at the top under ratios. We're going to write the definition first. A ratio is a comparison of 2 or more numbers. And a comparison is comparing data. So that's what it's used for, to compare different things, different pieces of data or information. For example, if I'm working in a small group, there is a ratio and we are comparing how many teachers to how many students are in that small group. So there could be 1 teacher for every 5 students in one group. So that's one example of a ratio. Now I'm going to slide down to the 3rd box that's on your note sheet. It's titled, You Should Know. So this is the first thing that you should know, and I'm going to wait till later in the lesson to say the last part of that box. But there are 3 ways to write a ratio. We're going to be using all 3 ways in this chapter. The first way, and please fill this in along with me, is to show that comparison using a fraction bar. So you're comparing 1 teacher to the 5 students in that small group. So we're going to write 1, and let's say we're comparing 1 teacher to 2 students. Say my group is smaller. One of the things being compared is in the numerator, and the other is in the denominator. So that's one way. Second way, with what's called a colon. That is like our digital clocks, the 2 dots right on top of each other. And then the numbers would be to the right and to the left of that column. Again, the same thing. The first thing being compared is to the left, then the column, and then the second thing being compared is on the right. So 1 teacher to 2 students. The 3rd way to write or show a ratio is with words. And I've actually been using the word that you're often going to see, and that is the word TO2. So when I'm saying this using a colon, I'm still using the words 1 to 2. So you can also actually use the word TO when you're writing a ratio. Now we're ready to do our example. So before we go into the center of that column of notes and do our example, here is another real life example. And if you've ever made rice or oatmeal or couscous or quinoa, there's a relationship. You need a certain amount of water depending on how much rice or oats or whatever you want to cook. So it might be a little small, but 1 cup of rice usually needs double and 2 cups of water in order to cook it. Similarly, the same thing is the case for oats and oatmeal. So 1 cup of oats, you need 2 cups of water. So that's the relationship and the comparison of how much water you would need and how much rice you would need. We use this all the time with the Trumble household for dinner when we're cooking rice. So real life connection to where ratios come up in everyday life. Now we're ready for our example. We do have to draw our stars and circles in, so go ahead and we're going to draw star, circle, star, circle, star, circle, star, circle, star. Alright, so we want to find the ratio between these stars and circles. Make sure you have the same number as I do. The first example, we are asked to find the ratio of stars to circles. I'm going to want you to mark up these by underlining the first thing being compared, then drawing a colon around the word to, and then drawing another line to the right of it. That you have just now built your ratio. Whenever you see that word to, whatever's to the left and whatever's to the right are the two things being compared. So we have 5 stars to 4 circles. Now we could write that as the fraction, or we could write it with the word to. So 3 ways to show the same ratio. Let me just point out, this bottom in bold, order matters. If the sentence had read, find the ratio of circles to stars, we should flip those numbers around. It does make a huge difference. So be careful about the order. Now here's our second example. You might see this as well. Find the ratio of circles, we'll underline that, to, here's our ratio keyword here, and you can box it if you're really trying to follow the cube strategies. Circles to total shapes. So now we have to combine all of the shapes and add them all up, and that number is what we're going to use. So we have 4 circles, and now we have 9 total shapes. Again, it could be the fraction 4/9, or it could be with that word to. But order does matter. That's the big deal. Now I'm going to go down to the very bottom of your note sheet. This is very important to help us have a little hint or a model sentence or two. There are 2 examples here for when we're explaining what ratios mean and what they represent. So I'm going to tackle this second quotation first. For every blank, there are blank. The blanks stand for, if you're dealing with fractions, the numerator and denominator of the ratio, or the first number and the second number. So for our first example with the circles and stars, for every 5 stars, there are 4 circles. We could use the teacher-student one as well. For every 1 teacher, there are 5 students. So you can interchange those blanks to be whatever you're talking about with the ratio. So underneath, this second quotation is for when, please fill this in right underneath on the very bottom, when comparing 2 things. But as you saw with our second example in our middle section of our notes, sometimes we're not comparing 2 things, sometimes we're comparing 1 thing to the total. That's the first quotation. And so I'd like you to write the word total to the right to remind yourself that that first quotation is for when you're dealing with a total. If you are showing with fractions, you're going to write an N and a D underneath. The first thing being compared. So for our example, it was circles. There are 4 out of the 9 shapes. What are they? They're circles. So example 1, you don't have to write all this down. Anything I write underneath here, you can write along the right-hand side. Write the ratio in simplest form that compares the number of baseballs to the number of soccer balls, then explain its meaning. So let's mark up. This is important to note. Simplest form. We'll talk about that in a second. And then we do have to explain its meaning and write the ratio. That's our task or our question. So we simply have to count up the soccer balls. And we have, I'm just going to write SB and then B for baseballs. We have 10 soccer balls and we have 4 baseballs. Now again, we could write it, sorry, this is example 1. You can label that in your notes. So, soccer balls are 10, baseballs, let's do BB, are 4. You could write it with the ratio as a colon. I'm going to stick with fractions though, because it says in simplest form. And in 5th grade and 4th grade, hopefully you remember how to simplify a fraction. This is an improper fraction, meaning the top is heavier than the bottom or bigger. So I'm going to think, what number can I divide both these numbers by to get an equivalent fraction? So I'm going to divide both sides, both the numerator and denominator, by 2 and get 5 over 2. That is in simplest form. So sometimes you're going to get a ratio that you can think, ooh, these numbers have a common factor. Let's divide to get this in simplest form. Now we have to explain what this means. We are comparing 2 things. So we're going to use the second quotation. For every blank, there are blank. So for every 5 soccer balls, there are 2 baseballs. And that's all explaining the meaning is. Using that quotation, plugging in the context. Example 2 is a little bit different. I'm going to walk you through this one. Divide 35 cans of food into 2 groups so that the ratio is 3 to 4. So this is asking us to do something different. We have a total of 35 cans, but we need to split them up so that the ratio of one group is 3 and in the other group is 4. So I could do this by showing a bar diagram. And this, in my notebook, I'm going to label it as example 2. So the bar diagram is more picture oriented. So I'm going to have 3 groups, and that's going to be the 3 part of the ratio. And then in the second group, I need 4. So altogether, I have 7 groups. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. So if I have 7 spaces, I need to divide my 35 up evenly amongst those spaces. 35 divided by 7 works out. So each space needs 5 cans of food. Now I have to add up 5, 5, and 5 to get 15 cans in this first group, and there are 20 cans in the second group. So the division of the 2 groups has to be 15 cans to 20 cans. If I add that up, I get my 35 cans. The other way you can do this is with fractions. If I start out with 3/4, that means I have 3 cans in the first group and 4 cans in the second group. That's 7 total. So I just add them up, numerator and denominator. But I don't have 7 cans, I have 35 cans. So let's double each number and get an equivalent fraction 6/8. It's the same ratio, but now I've just increased, I've doubled it. But this is only 14 cans. That's not 35 either, so let's keep going. Let's make another addition of 3 and 4. Now I have 21 cans. And see that in the pattern that I'm establishing here. Now I have 12 and 16 cans. So now I have 28. Still not 35. and now I'll have 15 and 20, and now I've arrived at the 35 cans. So either way, if you like the picture or you like the fractions, that is how to divide to get a certain ratio. The last example is another explain the meaning of a ratio problem. Best Buy conducted a study to determine what age groups shop in their store. Write the ratio that compares the number of customers that are 0 to 17 years of age to the total number of customers, then explain its meaning. You can pause and try this on your own, and then press play to see if you were right. So I need to use the table to solve this. I want to mark up that there's the age group of 0 to 17 that I am concerned about. So that is the ratio that is going to be first. Here's my 2. Here's my action word saying, oh, I'm going to do a ratio. Plus it says write the ratio. So that's pretty self-explanatory. But the other thing that we're comparing is that total. So we're going to have to add these bad boys up and then explain the meaning. So that's something else that we need to do. So first thing I'm going to do is find out how many people are in that age group of 0 to 17. So we have 15 for that age group. So this is the age group of 0 to 17, and now we have total. We have to add these guys out. So we have 10 and 10, so that's a nice 20. And then we have 3 and 5 is 10, and then 11. So we have a total of 110. So 15 over 110 is not in simplest form. So we're going to have to find an equivalent fraction by dividing to get this a little bit smaller. I noticed that both these numbers end in 0 and 5. That means they are both divisible by 5. And I might have to come over here and divide to get that answer. That's okay. It's 22. And now I have my ratio, but I have to explain its meaning. Because I'm dealing with total, I'm going to use that first quotation mark. And here's a possible way to explain it. I'm just going to get rid of my little division. Here we go. 3 shoppers. Notice I've added the context, not just the number 3. 3 shoppers, here's my buzzword, out of every 22 are, and what are they? They're from 0 to 17 years of age. Or you can say years old, does not matter that part. So there you are. We will practice this more in class. I hope you have a good night.